Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever Work of Design Live. My name is Dan, and I'm a member of the team here at Studio Designer, and I want to thank you all for joining us, and it's my pleasure to host today's event. As a quick overview, today we'll introduce our new digital magazine, The Work of Design. Then we'll enjoy a masterclass with Studio Designer's CEO and design industry expert, Keith Granet. And lastly, we'll conclude today's webinar with a Q&A. So please feel free to submit any questions you may have by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce you to The Work of Design, Studio Designer's new digital magazine. The Work of Design features insights to drive any design business forward. From industry events to exclusive interviews, The Work of Design is here for all designers to enjoy. Best of all, The Work of Design is completely free and is now available online at studiodesigner.com. As part of The Work of Design, we're happy to present our Mind for Design Masterclass series hosted by Keith Granet. Today, Keith will teach us how to staff your design business for success, 8 ways to run a more profitable design business, and how to maintain a client pipeline. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Keith Granet.
Welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us. And I want to thank Rachel, Lauren, and Dan for all their hard work in putting this together. It's very exciting for us to have this series, and we're glad you're joining us. And it's been an amazing response. So hopefully you'll enjoy what we have to say and share today. And then I'm anxious to hear your questions when we complete. So to jump right into it, we're going to talk about staffing. And as most of you probably have seen and heard and know, that staffing right now has been one of the greatest challenges of our industry. They're calling it the Great Resignation. People are moving around quite a bit. And I do think it has a lot to do with the world we've been living in. I think it has to do with the fact that we've lost some connectivity. You can't really mentor and create in Zoom. I think there's need for flexibility and how people work together. But I also think it's really important that we learn how to be a community and connect, which has always been my goal for the design industry, is to strengthen the community and the financial and business aspects of design. So just moving forward and talking about that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the importance of hiring the right people and sustaining that group so that you build a long-term lasting relationship with your employees. As it says here, our employees are our greatest asset. We don't make stuff, although we do somewhat make stuff, but we sell a service. And when you're a service industry, people are everything. And so having the right people, having the right voice for those people, and the right commitment and vision makes firms the most successful they can be. So I want to jump right into a chart that I created in my first book, The Business of Design, that I really believe is the way every design firm should think about their employees. And it's tough to really examine people this way, but it's also really valuable in understanding how they fit into your organization. And I use the word fit here, but in all honesty, it really should be how much they belong, because fit really implies that you have to change in order to accommodate something. And you don't really want to make people change. You want to make sure you're hiring the right people who belong in your organization. So when you look at this grid, you can see that there's the y-axis says skill level and the x-axis says cultural fit. And what I mean by culture is how well you feel that they belong within your organization, and skill, based upon the job that they've hired for, how skilled are they on that job? So we find that people who are highly skilled but don't really fit in, and this is, not a sort of a downplay on anybody, but we really see those as sort of what we call the competent jerks. They are the people who really know what they're doing, and they really don't want to listen to anybody else. if they don't fit in, they sort of have a lot of their own baggage. And those are tough people to train. And then you have the people who are really fit in quite well and belong within your organization, but they may not have the skill sets. And so those people are actually easier to coach because you can give them the skill set, but you really can't change people's spots. So the ultimate goal here is that you want to get everybody into that top right quadrant where they are strong in skill and strong in culture, and they belong together. We have seen times in different economies when we've identified people who live in that top right quadrant and we don't have the work to support them, and we've had to let them go. And it's a very difficult place to be. And that being said, anybody who is low in skill and low in culture really does not belong in your organization. And if you can identify those people, you should get rid of them. And I don't say it lightly, but they are the people who will bring down your organization. If they don't have the skill and they don't fit in, then they're not going to be great for your organization. Now, I also use this chart when reviewing candidates, or not candidates, but employees, and tell them where they are on the chart. So if they're a 5 in skill and a 7 in culture, they're going to be right on the border of that top right quadrant. And what I want to do is say, I want to get you over to being an 8 or a 9 in skill. What do we need to do? What training and what skill can we give you? The same with the cultural fit. If somebody if you feel like they're low and they need to be coached, how do we give them, how do we get them to sort of work well with others and make sure they're the right, they belong within your organization? So you can actually identify them on this chart and show them where they fit in and where you want them to go and how you're going to get there with them. And then everyone knows what those goals are to move forward. So like I said, a bad employment is like a drop of poison. And all you need is one drop and the glass is poisonous. So if you have employees that just they're poisonous or they're just not a great fit for your company, they could actually bring down the entire company. And that's why it's so important. You don't want that negative energy in your organization. It will really inhibit your growth. So some red flags when you're hiring. And I always sort of joke that when we hire people, we have to marry them. We don't get to date them because you just have to trust your gut and go with it. So here are some things that I've always said that you should really focus on when you're hiring somebody. Look at the resume. If it doesn't add up, whether it's time where they've worked or there's just something that's off, pay attention to that and really check references. It amazes me sometimes when I hear people don't check references. Everybody, wants to know what others think. And it is really the most important thing you can do is to make sure that you connect with somebody who has already worked with that person and can tell you as much as possible. Now, you may get somebody who's going to tell you, all we're allowed to do is tell you that they worked here and here are the dates. That tells you everything, because if you cannot get in trouble for being positive, you cannot get in trouble for speaking nicely about somebody. But if they won't even give you that, that's a red flag. Look at their appearance, how they show up. We are in the design profession. Appearance is almost everything. It's how we present ourselves. You want people who are good ambassadors to your company. So if they show up and they don't look like what you think somebody you can put in front of a client should look like, then it is definitely a red flag. Now, of course, if they're a delivery person or somebody who is going to not really have much client facing, you can sort of push that away a little bit. But again, it's how they appear when you first meet them, because first impressions are everything. If they have difficulty communicating and can't get things out clearly, that's going to be a problem. So really look for that as well. If they come across overconfident I would again worry about that. You want people who are sponges in your organization. When they come and join you, you want them to be inquisitive. And if they're not inquisitive and they're just all about what they know, they're going to be that competent jerk. They're going to be that person who basically feels like they don't need to learn anymore and they don't need to know your business. They know enough. That's not a great employee. If they come and they constantly talk about their previous employer in a negative way, it's truly a red flag. You really want to come with them a very positive attitude about this potential for this job. And if they're just bashing everybody, that's not going to be good because you're going to be next. If they're hyper aware of your company details, it seems like that's good that they know everything. But if they really are trying to dig really deep before they even know who you are, again, it's a red flag about how much they're going to want to know about the company. And I've always believed in transparency. And so it's really important that you're as open as possible with people. But if they dig a little too deep, it's questionable. You look at their social media. It's very important to see how people present themselves. It is tremendously public to everybody. And even if they have private accounts, there's usually ways of seeing and Googling them to see if there's some things that concern you. These people are going to be ambassadors for your company. And if they present themselves in social media in a way that you're not comfortable with, it's a red flag. So money talk. If they bring up money right away without really any justification to what you're discussing, again, it's going to be questioned. They're going to constantly be asking you for more money. So just be cautious of that. If they show up late, that is not what you want. You want somebody who is punctual and on time. And lastly, plagiarism. It's if you see things, if they're showing portfolios that are not theirs, and it's a very tough thing to do because you don't know whether somebody simply just worked on one project and they have every right to sort of show the project they worked on, or if it's just they took a bunch of the photos from their previous firm and said they worked on it. Again, it's difficult to know exactly what they did, but ask them to explain it. I had a client years ago that there was a very young, talented designer who really didn't have much of a portfolio and said, I don't know what to present you. And I thought the most brilliant thing she did is said, look, I don't care that you don't, I think you look like you're going to be a great employee. Why don't you do this? Why don't you go back and knowing what your aesthetic is, build a portfolio as if it was your own, just from magazines or images, and put it together and let me look at it. And then I can tell how connected we are. It's a great way to have a young person who may not have the experience or the portfolio to present and show where their eye goes. And so I highly recommend that if you find that there are junior people that you want to know more about. So moving on from employees to really how to run a more profitable business. These 8 tools are things that I've used year after year with many of my clients, and we find that it really helps them understand how the business runs. First I want to say that this is a job, this is a career and a firm, and you want to make sure you're running it successfully. And yes, as much as we all love design, you don't want to be a starving artist. You want to run a successful practice. And all of the systems that we tell you to put in place are really to free you up to design more. They're not meant to burden you with all of this business decisions and advices. But if you have good systems in place, if you have, good bookkeeping and you have good contracts and employee reviews and all of the things that we suggest you do, you actually get freed up to do your best work because you're not worried where that next client's coming from or whether you're going to make payroll or how you pay the rent. If you have these systems in place, your mind then will focus on design, which is most important. So here are some of these 8 practices I'd like to talk to you about. So pricing your services correctly. You know what you do and you know how you do it. And many people do that. What's most important is why. Why do you love this profession? Why is somebody going to hire you? And how do you assess what you're worth? I remember the first time that I ever had my first client, which is over 30 years ago, I had no idea how to charge them because I'd worked for somebody, I'd never worked on my own. And I remember telling somebody, oh, I think I'll be $50 an hour. And they're like, you got to be worth more than that. Now, 30 years ago, I still think I was worth more than that, but I did then raise it very quickly. But you want to really tie it to what your worth is. And we'll go into the different ways of billing, but oftentimes people say, well, I just bill hourly because I can never get hurt. Well, the problem is if you spend 30 years building an expertise and it takes you 10 minutes to put it down on a piece of paper, is it only worth 10 minutes of your time? And your billing rate could never be high enough to accommodate that. So looking at other ways to charge are very important, but really understanding how to price yourself so that, one, you're somewhat competitive, but it's all about how you sell yourself and how you can convince somebody that that's your value. And selling your value is what we're doing. We're not selling your time. We're selling really your expertise and your experience and who you are. And oftentimes you'll find that if it comes down to you and somebody else, there's really very little you could do to close that deal. It's just going to come down to who's the best fit for the client. But really understanding what your value is, how to assess it, and give it in a way that it ties to what you're charging. It's important to communicate your experience with your clients. And I'm going to go into that in a deeper level at the end of this, where we talk about how to create sustainable clients. And then, you have to demonstrate your value by your service. Again, we're a service industry. So everything you do to identify what your value is going to come from what comes from you and your employees. And so giving great service creates great value. And then minimize unexpected expenses. If you can, we all have things that happen where whether we have to pay for a mistake we made to a client, or whether there's an increase in your health insurance. To minimize that is just to plan for it better and to make sure that you are doing everything you can to keep on top of things and not being surprised. The second thing is budgeting. It amazes me how many firms we work with that don't do this, and then eventually we get them to do it. But first, there's 2 types of budgets. There's your annual budget, which you're going through is like, what do we think we're going to earn this year? And what do we think our expenses are? And of course, you can't identify everything, at the beginning of the year that's going to hit in the month or hit at the beginning of the year. So it's important that you sort of estimate that based upon what your expenses have been in the past. And then when it comes down to coming up with your fees for your budget, it's important to really see what your backlog is. And what I mean by backlog is how many clients have committed to projects and how much do you think you're going to be able to bill on a monthly basis. And then when that backlog starts drying up, how do you estimate what you need to bring in new work? And usually that's tied to your salaries and your staff. So if you have 10 people you have to keep busy, you have to find enough work to keep those 10 people busy. And it's important to go look for work when you're busiest, because if you wait until you're slow, it's going to be too late. We know it takes a long time to bring in a new project. And so it's really important that you stay on top of that. And then, understanding what kind of profit you want to make. We're not doing this many of us are doing this because we love it, but we really obviously need to make some money at it. And if you create a profit target and then work backwards from that, then that'll help you understand what you can afford to pay people, what your expenses are, and how much you need to bill every month. we've used some great profit planning reports that on a monthly basis, you would look at those and see how you're doing against your target. So if I expect to bill 100,000 in a month and I'm only billing 80, what's going on? If I bill 120, do I have the staff to continue that? And is it sustainable? And then on the project side, creating budgets that help you manage the cost of that project. What is it taking in labor to do a project? You know, many times I hear that employees don't want to put all their hours down because they're going to go over budget. That helps nobody, because then you don't know what it costs you to do a project. So when you look back and say, look, I think this project's going to take 1,000 hours because that's what the last project was. But if somebody didn't record 30% of their time, then you're working against a target that's not accurate. So make sure your employees put down every hour they work on a project, whether it's billable or not, because that's going to give you an accurate assessment of how to bill and how to budget yourself in the months and projects ahead. And then look at these things monthly. Make sure that you're really looking at it and knowing when you either need to put a tourniquet on a project because it's getting out of hand, or whether you need to put more energy or effort into the project. But if you don't look at it at a certain frequency, then you're going to wake up one day and realize, I don't know how we've lost so much money on this project, and you're never going to be able to recoup it. So the more you can stay on top of those numbers, and that doesn't have to be you as the principal, it certainly should be your project managers who are looking at this and reporting back to you. So going back back to the team for success, you know, we talked a lot about that, and it is one of the top 8 tips here. What's important is you don't want to be a hire fire firm, that when you're busy, you hire, and when you lay off people when you don't have the work. It doesn't create sustainability, and it's very expensive. It costs a lot of money to get somebody up to speed and to train them. And if you have a revolving door, your office won't be as successful and as profitable, but it's just an exhausting way to conduct a business. You also lose the chance of having a dedicated team. People like working with each other, and if you can create a good team, they're going to stick around for a long time. I have clients who have employees for 30 years, and they grow and they learn, and they love the projects they work on, and it all takes time and energy to build that kind of commitment. And so it's really important that you really focus on your employees. You want to be a long-term firm. You want to be someplace that people want to stay, and they want to work, and they see the progress. And you want to help develop them and dedicate them to growing their skills. Try to be, as much as you can, a learning, growing environment. You know, we're asked a lot to help people build mentor programs. And what we've come down to at the end of the day is that mentorship should be just part of your daily. It really shouldn't be something that you have to create a program. It should be in your ethos. You should be able to say, we are a learning, growing environment, and everything we do is part of mentorship. And that helps you grow and learn, and it helps your team grow and learn, and they stick around. The morale of an office is that culture. It's that people enjoy coming to work every day. They want to be together. You know, one of the things we've done here at the studio is, you know, given the pandemic and given the return to work, and as well as work from home, we have a hybrid situation. And right now people are coming in 3 days a week, but 2 of those days we actually feed them. And we find that it gels the people, it brings them together. It allows them to learn about each other and appreciate each other. And it's been a very successful structure for us. Of course, I would like to see everybody here 5 days a week, but I know that flexibility, even if the pandemic hadn't hit us, was coming our way, and we should have been prepared for it. So number 4 is looking at the big picture, having the ability to see your finances on a regular basis, the ability to just have a snapshot. We're all visual people, and having the ability to see something graphically just makes it much easier to comprehend. So simply knowing, how well am I doing against my annual business target? So in this case, we're showing you, we're at 70% of where we wanted to be. And this is what we build every month. This is how much it cost us. These are the profits we've made. How does this compare to our budget? These are all tools that I think help you understand your business and help you just see it at a glance and feel comfortable that the firm's doing okay. So along the money side is I've always believed in this 10% rule, which is, people at the end of the year, whether they have to pay taxes or their professional liability insurance is due, and it's a big number. If you put 10% aside of every dollar that comes in, even if, let's just say you're billing $100,000 a month, by the end of the year, you're going to have $120,000 set aside for all of those expenses that you did not expect. And yet, if I said to you in December, I need $120,000, you're like, where's that coming from? So if you just, every check that came in, you just carved out 10% of it and put it into a savings account, it's a great habit to have. And then 10% off your fees for budgets. If you give somebody a budget of $1,000, they're going to spend $1,000. They may spend $1,200. But if you give them a budget of $900, that 10% that you've taken away from their budget, they're going to work against. And then you have a contingency if things go off the rails. So it's important that you carve out a percentage of what you allow people to work on, and then you'll have a contingency to complete the project. Because in most cases, we wind up going over. And then think about your staff's skills. How do I improve what you're capable of doing by 10% every year? How do I give you enough to grow so that you can then continue to feel like you're in this growing learning environment? I don't know that you need a specific target of 10%. It's just an easy thing to put out here, but it's setting the example that we want you to grow, and we're going to find skills that are going to improve you by that much, at least every year. So number 6 is the frequency you should review your financial statements. So on a weekly basis, you should know how much money you have in the bank. I can't tell you how many clients I have had that have said, I just found out my bookkeeper stole $100,000. And in one case, it was $3 million. It was over many years, but there were a million ways that nobody was looking at the numbers and the money. And what typically happens is people start saying, oh, they're not looking at it, I'm going to take a little bit. And then they get greedy and they take a little more and a little more till they get caught. They always get caught. So you, as the principal of a firm, need to know how much money is in the bank. You need to, and your employees need to know you care. And so it's really important that on a weekly basis, somebody tells you how much cash you have in the bank. Look at your projects on a weekly basis. Just how are we doing? They don't have to be, you don't have to dive into them really deeply, but you really need to know that they're moving in the right direction. Review time cards. Know what people are spending their time on. Or if it's not you, it certainly should be the managers. And then your purchasing reports. Have we received a bunch of money from the client and we haven't ordered anything yet? We need to know that. Now, we've noticed here at Studio that the timeline between somebody writing a proposal and putting a purchase order together has shortened from as long as 30 days to almost 6 days and sometimes 6 hours. Part of that is because we know how screwed up the supply chain is, and if you don't get it out there, you're never going to get it. And so given that, we've seen a real uptick in getting those purchasing, those POs out the door. But look at it, make sure that if the client has paid you, then you're moving very quickly in getting that item purchased. On a monthly basis, monitor your budgets, review your financial statements, look at your accounts receivable, who owes you money, look at your accounts payable, who do you owe money to? And then an executive summary like this sheet that I showed you just previously. Look at that just to know that every month you know the health of your company. Semi-annually, staff bonuses. Do they deserve a bonus? Is there a way of identifying them? Is there a system in place to really review bonuses? and let people know that you appreciate them. And how are we doing financially? Can we afford to give bonuses? Ask your accountants to look at your financials so that you don't have any surprises at the end of the year. And then annually, you want to create budgets for your operating of your office. Like, how much do we think we're going to make this year, and what are our expenses? 7, be transparent with your staff. So I always love the line, open doors, not open drawers. There are certain things that are confidential and should be kept confidential. But the more you give people information, the more power they have to help you run a successful company. Let them know what it costs you to run the company. We used to do this fun exercise where we would basically say, what do you think is more expensive? The cost of office supplies or the lease on a 7 Series BMW? What do you think is more expensive? A mortgage on a $500,000 house, or what we spend on health insurance? And when you relate the expenses of the office to everyday expenses that people have, they can relate to it in a better way. And we usually find that there are a million pens that show up on the office manager's desk the next day because they feel so guilty for stealing them all. But anyway, it's a good idea to be transparent about your costs because people will help you bring those down. Tell people what your profit goals are. Now, it's important to communicate what profit is because many people think it all goes into your pocket as the principal. But the truth is, you need a profit in order to pay bonuses, to pay your 401k, to, if a client is late in paying you or doesn't pay you at all, you need good cash flow. And so having profit goals is really important. And if people understand them, they'll help you achieve them. In understanding that if you don't have a profit, there's no money for bonuses. Where's it going to come from? So people know that affects the way they think and what they can get if the firm is doing well. So the more the firm does well, if you share in that, then they will help you be successful. So how does that empower people? Data helps people make good decisions. It helps them run the costs of the business, and it helps improve your financials. So lastly on this section is use contracts for the unexpected. I've often said that a contract should never be pulled out to talk about what your problem is on a project, because at that point, you've lost communication with your client. And so what they're meant to be is a clear understanding of what you're committing to, what the client is committing to, what you're committing to. But if you have to open up your contract and point to it, it means you've lost. And by the way, all of your clients probably have a lot more money than you do to fight you. So if you're ever going to get to that point, you're probably going to lose. So really know that a contract's purpose is to set expectations and truly nothing more, unless it gets really bad. And then you've got a whole nother set of circumstances. So 8 ways to be more profitable. Let me just review this with you. Price your services correctly. Budget for the year. Build the right team. Understand the big picture. Establish good money habits, that 10% rule. Review your financials frequently. Transparency delivers better management. And use contracts for the unexpected. So now I want to sort of move on to how to keep an ideal client pipeline, which, every designer I've ever worked with has that same feeling about, I can never say no because I don't know if it's my last client. And chances are it never really is your last client. But the feeling of I have to go get another client, I have to take this project, is what can really hurt you. You have to make sure a client is the right fit for your company. The stronger your client pipeline is, and the fact that your clients repeat work, and what I mean by repeat work is that a client's coming back for more, another house, another project, or they're referring you on to somebody else, or it's a family member, it's a friend. You want that to be at least 80% of your business. where you don't have to have cold calls with every new client. It's exhausting to do that. So you want to make sure your repeat business is at a minimum 80%. So how to select clients. So this is something that I think every designer should understand and really put a lot of energy into, which is you want to make sure you're interviewing a client as much as they're interviewing you. So I want to share a quick story with you. So I had a client call me and said, our hit rate is really low and I don't know why. And I said, explain to me what it is that you do with the new client and what does that process look like? And they said, well, typically we'll go to the site, we'll meet somebody, and then we'll look at the project, and then we go back to our office and we write a proposal and we send it to them. And we're probably getting 10% of those projects. And I said, here's the problem, is you don't know them and they don't know you. What you should never send a client a proposal after the first meeting. You have to understand who they are and what they want from you, and they need to understand who you are and if you're the right fit. But if you get a piece of paper that's committing to millions of dollars, you can be sure that if they don't really recognize or understand you well, they're not going to commit to it. So there's this whole process about inquiry and advocacy. So you always want to inquire first before you advocate for yourself. You want to ask all the right questions. You want to be able to say, what is your objective to this project? Why are you building this project? What is it you like about us as a firm that you want to work with us? As much inquiry as you possibly can give before you start advocating, which means that you really are then starting to talk about yourself. Here's why you should hire us, because we give great service, we do beautiful work. Those are all well and good, and there's going to be a time for that. But first, inquire before you start advocating for yourself. So during inquiry, right, you really want to find a common goal. We all know this. When we've met somebody at a cocktail party, or we're interviewing a potential client or a potential employee, you look for that nugget of information that you can grab onto. You look for something that keeps you find that common ground where you can connect to somebody. And once you create that connection, the ability for you to build a relationship with them becomes really strong. If you can't find a common ground, the project is not going to move well. And probably the good chances are you won't get the project. So make sure that when you're talking and you're inquiring, when you're going through inquiry, you are really digging in deep to realize who they are and what it is that they want before. So let's just say they said, I love this particular project. And then when you get to advocacy, you get to say, you mentioned this project. We think this is a project we've done that's very similar to that. And with that, you've connected each other in a way that you're tying your work to their goals. And that creates a great relationship. So then how do you figure out if somebody's an ideal client? Well, first, they have to be good people, right? Nobody wants to work with people they don't like. And, there are often times where there's just the most amazing project, but the most difficult client. You really have to make a decision whether you're going to work with somebody who you're not going to enjoy working with. Life is pretty short, and we want to make sure that we really love who we work with and we want to spend that time with. It's especially residential home design is a very intimate practice. And it's important that you feel like these are people that you would like. You have to ask yourself, will this project advance my firm? Is it going to be one more project that I don't want to do anymore? Or is it going to be something that's actually going to stretch me and help me advance the firm? And so these 7 choices that I'm going over right now, at least 4 of them should fit the bill. And if they don't, you have to learn how to say no, because it's not going to be a good experience. So can I work with the client? Do they have an owner's rep that keeps me at bay from them and I can't talk to them? The worst experience comes like that. Are they somebody that, listens well? Are they someone who has done this before? Do they appreciate this experience, that your experience and your expertise? Do they want to work with you because they love your work, or that somebody told them and they had to work with you? Why are they wanting to work with you? You want to make sure they appreciate who you are. Does the client have the proper budget to build this project? The worst case you can do is to underestimate a project and find out after you've finished a schematic set or a DD set that they can't afford to actually build the project. That will serve nobody well. They will have a bad experience and you're not going to get to build the project. So make sure they have a proper budget and be honest. I once had a client who told me that he told the client, this is what it's going to cost. And the client said, there's no way I'm doing this job for that amount of money. And he goes, well, if anybody tells you elsewise that it's going to cost less, they're lying to you. So fast forward, they do the project. The client gets a call from another person and says, my friend who did not hire you said you are the person I should hire because you were honest with them. Their project has cost them more than you ever said it was going to cost. And the fact is that now, if they had gone with you and listened to you, they would have been in a much better place. So that's why we want to talk to you. Be honest about the budget. It's a tricky dance because many people hear numbers that are crazy. But if you can, what I like telling people is when you look at our work and you want that level of quality, it's going to cost you this much. And if we're not the right fit, we understand. So are all the members of the team people you want to work with? Meaning, are they bringing, if you're an architect and they're bringing an interior designer, can you work with them? Or vice versa? Or is the contractor right or wrong for the project? Do they have family members that want to, build all the cabinetry and not charge you, or you're not being able to bill against, but you have to do all the work? Make sure the team that they're putting together and that you're helping with is the team you want to work with. So this is the one comment that I get asked all the time, or I get referenced. It's in my book, and it says, if they don't offer you a glass of water, they're not going to be a good client. And I can't tell you how many people have said, there is nothing more important than that. Because the truth is, if they don't offer you a glass of water, they don't care about you. And the project's not going to be a good one. You want people who care about you and who are polite and respectful of you, and that you're just simply not the hired help to them. So we talked a little bit about advocacy, but when you get into it, when you get to that point where it's your turn to talk about who you are and why somebody should hire you, here are some of those steps. Share your passion. People want to hear what it is you love about this profession, what you love about what you do. And when you hear that someone's passionate about, you want to work with those people. So make sure you share your passion with everybody. Show how their talents benefit the client. Meaning, how is the work that I do going to be beneficial to you? How is it that what I know how to do, what are the skill sets I've learned is actually going to make this project more successful and really help you get to what you're trying to achieve? Looking at your past work, it's important that they see what you've done and then ask them, what is it about this work that appeals to you? And what don't you like and what do you like? And get to know them. I had a client years ago who also said that when new clients would come in, they'd say, just take a second, close your eyes. Imagine you're getting out of bed. When you step out of that bed and put your feet on the ground, what does that feel like? When you grab a handle, how do you want that to feel? How do you want it to turn? When you go into the bathroom, how should the lighting be? Make people live their life through that experience, and you'll learn so much about who they are and what you need to do for them to make them happy, to make them have the projects they're looking for. Go into the details of the project. What are the logistics? What are the costs? What's the process? I always loved that when new clients come in, that my clients will bring in, say, their bookkeeper or their controller and say, we're going to walk you through our billing process. Here's what an invoice looks like. Here's what you're going to receive from us. Here's what we expect back. We're going to get this within a certain period of time. If they can see all of that stuff up front and get that behind them, then you get to do all the fun stuff and design with them. But you eliminate their expectation that they don't know what they're going to get, and you put things in front of them in a way that they can understand, and there's no surprises. This is what you're going to receive. We bill every month. Expect that invoice every month. If you want something different, if you want it every 2 weeks, we can do that as well. But let them know your process, and the whole process will become more successful. There is nothing more important than trust. If a client loses their trust, which means that's when you're pulling out that contract to say, this is what you told me I was going to do, you're in trouble. You need mutual respect and you need trust. So don't be afraid to say no. So I said this early on, it's the hardest thing for designers to do. One, they don't like conflict. I always say that architects are born without the conflict gene. And the truth is that nobody really likes conflict. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. Most people don't like doing it. But when you say yes to a project you know is not right, or your gut tells you, trust me, it's not going to be good, and you're going to be sorry that you took on that project. So learn how to say no, and you can do it in the nicest way. The best way to do it is to be able to refer them on. If somebody feels like they're just being left with a no, they're not going to feel very good. But if you're like, we're too busy, or we're not philosophically aligned, or we don't think what you're looking for is what we do, but here are some other choices. If you lead them down that path, they're going to leave with a better experience to that no. So just be careful how you do it, but it's important to do it. So with that, I feel like I've talked a lot and would like to open this up for some Q&A, because I see that there are questions out there.
Yes, absolutely. Keith, thanks so much for all these great insights. And thank you to everyone in our audience that submitted some amazing questions. Just as a reminder, before we move into the Q&A, I did want to remind everyone that you can enjoy today's webinar along with other valuable insights in our brand new digital magazine titled The Work of Design. All of this is available for free at studiodesigner.com/theworkofdesign. Also, I want to let everyone know that The Work of Design Live will return this fall, and we hope you can join us again, as Keith and our team will be back to present another masterclass to help empower every designer for success. Details about our next Work of Design Live will be coming soon, and we'll be sure to send an invite to each of you on this series. So without further ado, let's get started with our Q&A. Again, thank you to everyone that's watching who've provided these great questions. Keith, today's first question comes from Jessica. She asks, do you have any tips for how to weigh the pros and cons of a project that may have a non-disclosure agreement?
Wow, really great question. I've been dealing with this a lot lately. You know, when you have extremely wealthy clients that do not want you to share your project or get it photographed or even put on your portfolio, it's a challenge, because we only have our work to show. And if they're a client that doesn't entertain, then no one's ever going to see the work. So you have to ask yourself, what's the benefit of working? Now, financially, it's probably, if they're a wealthy client, the hope is that you're going to, do a great project and make some money at it. But you really have to ask yourself, am I going to spend the next 2 or 3 years working on something that no one's ever going to see? And does that provide any benefit? Ultimately, if it builds a long-term relationship with a patron client that's going to do more and more work, sure, it has a benefit. But then what I would push back, if you can, is, look, I won't use your name, but I need to be able to publish your project. And if I can't publish it in, whether online or in a magazine, can I at least use it for my website, or at least use it for my portfolio? Because we're going to be spending the time. Most clients are reasonable about that. But you have to be really careful. And if you sign an NDA and it's a very high profile client, you really have to be careful. And I remember this happened to one of my clients once where they agreed that they wouldn't use their name. And yet when they took pictures, there was a picture of the entire family on the bedside table that got published, and everyone knew exactly who it was. So you do want to be really careful when you have an NDA client, but you really have to weigh the value of that if it's going to stifle your practice or actually help you.
It's really insightful. Keith, our next question comes from Mary. This is in reference to the hiring process, specifically talking about when you're going through references, do you have a way of handling maybe that your questions that you have for the references, just to see if you can get some more items to discover through a potential hire's reference?
Meaning that when you, I'm assuming this means that when you're trying to get references on an employee and you're not necessarily getting the right sources, or I mean, everyone, you should always ask for references. And in many cases, they'll only give you their friends or the people they've worked with. And what's important is find something, whether it's who they worked for before or who they didn't list as a reference, that you can call. Because you're going to find out a lot more information if it's somebody that they don't give you. So at least one of the references should be somebody that you've done some digging and get to, versus just the names they give you.
Great. Our next question comes from Chris. They ask, how much of my work should be from repeat business versus new clients?
So I did say that I think repeat business should be about 80% of your work, because it's truly exhausting to constantly be interviewing for new clients. So repeat work should be 80, and sometimes it's higher than that.
Wonderful. For our next question is, when it comes to upskilling some employees, this is in reference to the 10% rule, do you have any resources that you recommend for building your staff's experience or expertise?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of sort of learning tools out there, whether it's classes that you can help them participate in organizations, you know, like AIA or the ICAA, ASID. All of those organizations usually have some kind of teaching or workshops. And, you know, what I like about doing things like that is that you're usually with like-minded people, and they have different experiences and you learn from them. And so when you do those types of things online, you may not have the same experience versus doing something with a group or an organization that does workshops where you can communicate and talk to each other about what your issues are, and you learn from each other. But some of those organizations certainly have good continuing ed programs.
We do want to be cognizant of our time here. So we do have about 5 minutes left. For those in the audience, if we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to answer that on the side. I'm going to say this will probably be our last question for the series here, but do you have any tips on how to turn a difficult client into a good client?
I didn't say I was a miracle worker. I would say, most client, now a difficult client is if they're respectful or demanding, they've probably earned the right. This is a very privileged profession. And if they're hiring you, they've probably earned the right to be demanding. But difficult is challenging, because if they're not respectful, then I think you either have to set some ground rules or they're the wrong client for you. So a good example is the difference between responding to a text at 2 o'clock in the morning or waiting till the next morning. And you have to set those boundaries with those clients. So if you can't sort of corral a difficult client into understanding what's acceptable, I mean, some clients say, look, I don't work on the weekend. And they don't, or the client doesn't say that, but the designer does. And the client wants you to work on the weekend. If that's truly your boundary, you need to set it from the beginning. And if a difficult client is just disrespectful and rude and doesn't really respect you for what you do, they're the wrong client for you. But if they're demanding, they're going to be demanding because they're used to good service because they can afford it. So what's really important is to set those boundaries, make sure that you're giving them the service that they expect, and that you communicate with them. So if they do something that throws you off, then I think it's important for you to really articulate that to them and say, look, I can't respond in that manner, or we're not able to do this because of X or Y. And that way, I think that they then, if they're a reasonable client, will understand what those boundaries are and help you make the project successful. The ultimate goal at the end of the day is everybody wants this to be a beautiful, successful project, and nobody wants anybody to fail. So keep that as the eye on the ball. And that should be, your North Star, is making sure that you're delivering the best work you can. And that includes a respectful client.
That's great. Keith, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, thank you to everybody for tuning in for our first ever Work of Design Live. Again, we'll be back in the fall for another masterclass with Keith. In the meantime, please visit studiodesigner.com and check out our brand new digital magazine, The Work of Design. In the meantime, have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Really enjoyed this.